Hello and welcome to Breaking Down the Barriers of Working with Elected Officials. I'm going to pass you off to the host for this session, Sarah Morsi. Sarah, take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us at the Governor's Conference. As Dan introduced me, my name is Sarah Morsi, and I am the Director of Public Affairs and Industry Communications at Travel Oregon. We've developed this panel after the response we received from the 2020 Oregon Tourism Industry Stakeholder Survey, which found that Oregon tourism businesses and organizations, such as yourselves, wanted to really learn more about how to organize and effectively communicate with elected officials and policymakers about the role of tourism in the local and state economy, and when necessary, the most effective way to advocate for policies and funding to support tourism. This panel will cover best practices in effective communications, break down the do's and don'ts of approaching elected officials, and engage participants in a question and answer format. Before we start, we will be utilizing the Q&A feature, and I'd like you to ask your questions in the Q&A tool throughout the discussion. I'll manage the questions, and we'll spend about 10 minutes of the presentation for the panelists to answer your questions. Any question is completely valid. There's no silly question, and I really encourage you all to participate in the discussion. Now I'm going to introduce our two panelists. I will note that Tobias is going to be joining us about 5 minutes late, but he will be on. So we're going to start with Anna, but I will introduce Tobias just for housekeeping. And Tobias Reed is serving in his second term as Oregon's state treasurer, where he's currently focused on helping Oregon recover from the pandemic and wildfires. Prior to the role of Oregon treasurer, he spent a decade serving in the Oregon House of Representatives, worked at Nike, and for the US Treasury. Tobias is passionate about public education at every level and improving state financial management, finance infrastructure, and providing Oregonians the tools to save for a more secure future. We're really excited to have him on this panel. And next we have Anna Richter-Taylor. Anna is the owner of Art Public Affairs, and she specializes in tackling complex issues, often at the cross-section of policy, politics, and communications. Anna started her career in Washington, D.C. in the Clinton administration, and then honed her communications, policy, and political skills while serving as the senior advisor and communications director for Oregon Governor Ted Kulongoski through his second term. She also worked at Gallatin Public Affairs for 4 years. Anna has strong relationships with leaders in the public and private sectors, as well as media throughout the state. She asks the right questions and brings a fresh yet seasoned perspective to help deliver workable solutions to complicated issues. I've had the honor of working with her for the last year, and I'm really excited that she's here to join us today. So Anna, let's start with you. I remember when I was first meeting with elected officials, I was always intimidated, whether it was in DC, trying to advocate for, in my previous job, levy infrastructure and funding, or at the state capitol, trying to educate policymakers about tourism development and the funding that is attributed to the TLT. How do you start? What are some tips to engage with those elected officials at various levels of government? And what can people do to prepare for those conversations?
Sure. Well, there's a couple of things just in general when working with elected officials, and I think it kind of transcends across all communications these days. But assume anything that you say is always on the record and will be repeated and has a way to get to other people. So just always know that, including in seminars like this. And also just at the premise, elected officials are people too. They get up in the morning, they brush their teeth, they drink their coffee or tea. They have kids, they have families, they have a history and their own story. So they're just like us in many regards, only they're elected officials, which means that they do have a role to play as representatives of various forms of government. But I would say that there's about 5 critical things to know. And I think if you walk away from today, one is that staff are critical. The elected official is going to rely on their staff no matter what level of government you're talking about. And even at the most local level, the staff in the regulatory bureau or department, they are who you need to also work through and build relationships with. because they're going to look to them for their expertise and their guidance when it comes to decision-making time. So in that regard, the do and don't, be respectful to staff. I mean, be respectful to the elected official, but be very respectful to staff too, because they're the gatekeepers and ultimately they're the most important people in many regards. Always be honest. Your credibility is critical. It's like any other relationship where if you lose your credibility by not being honest about something, it's very, very hard to rebuild. And so, for example, if you're going to meet with an elected official or the staff and you have a specific topic you want to meet on, but you might have a couple of different interest areas, either be clear that you want to cover all of them or stick to the topic at hand. When I worked for the governor, there were a few times when people came in to meet on one topic and then brought up an entirely different one. And that's not, it just hurts credibility, and it makes an elected official less likely to want to keep working with you and trust what you're saying. So make sure you are honest and stick to the point. The other thing I would say, and I think this is kind of, you hear this a lot, but all politics is local. I think that more and more that's becoming, it's just a very important point. That if you have relationships that in your community at the most basic level, that will build community support for what you do and allow more voices to be part of your advocacy when it, let's just say if you're going to Salem or DC. So if you have local city councilors, county commissioners, mayors, other elected officials who are supporting you at the local level, then they have relationships with the other elected officials at the next level that support and carry a lot of weight and credibility. And whenever you go meet with, I mean, it's like anything else. You want to have an agenda, you want to have a purpose for meeting and make it very clear. Sometimes it's okay to meet just to say we want to 15-minute introductions, get to know you, share a little bit more about who you are and what your organization does and what your role is in the community. And that's a perfectly fine reason to meet. You might find a connection that brings you, that leads to other relationship building down the road. If you do want to talk about a particular issue, then make sure that you're clear on that too. So they're not caught off guard and you provide materials in advance that would help them read and understand what the topic is, especially if it's something they're not informed on or it's not in their background. And then lastly, I would say, know your audience. Do a little bit of research, find out who you're meeting with, what's their background. Maybe you have something you can connect with on a personal level, which is always helpful, but know their background, what their expertise is. If you're meeting with someone who's an engineer by profession, they may not know a lot about what you do. So look for understanding who they are, what they're bringing to the table, the perspective they have when they come to the conversation.
Thank you. And I see Tobias has joined us.
Here I am, sorry. A little bit late, but excited to be here.
Hi, Tobias. And just to get you settled, I'm going to ask another question to Anna quickly. While you were at the governor's office and you were on the receiving end of advocacy communication, what are some examples of times in which advocacy was effective or not?
Good. That's a long time ago. So advocacy kind of has changed in some regard. I will say showing up in person, that was really impactful. Also letter writing, especially in volume, but not in a stock kind of way. I mean, I think technology has evolved so much now that it's a lot easier to do in mass quantities and it's easier just to kind of delete it. Back in the day, that was harder. So it actually took a lot of effort to put the email in and to send a handwritten letter, but just having that, because they tally it, we'd be like, okay, 350 letters came in on an issue, but the showing up matters. And I think being respectful too. There's controversial issues, people get very emotional and that's understandable, but when it's in a respectful way, people want to listen if you're going to be respectful about it.
Thank you. And this next question is for Tobias. Tobias, again, thank you so much for joining us today. And I wanted to ask, can you think of a time when as a legislator or treasurer that you had a position on an issue and because of a meeting with a constituent or a letter or a phone call, you actually either modified or changed your position?
Yeah, I think when I think about this, the things that are not, I think are most effective are when people can tell you a personal and a real story. And the one that comes to mind most immediately is an experience I had with a cannabis retailer who had been talking to me, as a number of other businesses had, about the challenges that not having access to banking services presented. And he invited me to go with him in the journey to pay his taxes. And of course, not having access to a bank account meant that he was doing it in cash. And maybe you've had this experience, but driving on I-5 with a duffel bag full of $50,000 in cash and then walking on the street to the Department of Revenue is not a particularly reassuring, safe sort of feeling. So I already had a cursory kind of understanding of the importance of that issue, but the experience of being there and seeing it and feeling it really deepened the immediacy of the issue and the concern. And so I think really to support what Anna was saying, and again, sorry for being a little late, it is that those opportunities when you can make something immediate, when you can make it personal, when you can invite the person you're communicating with to have some of that same experience, when you can be most effective. And that's not the only time I've had that experience, but it's one that definitely sticks in my mind.
Thank you. And I wanted to ask, speaking of being with someone in person or showing an experience, this past year, we saw the state legislative session be fully virtual, especially for constituents, and future sessions may be a combination of both virtual or in person. Do you see this as a positive or a negative? And how should constituents best engage if elected officials are only meeting virtually?
Yeah, I think it is, the short answer to your question, or most immediately, is to be determined. I think it has the potential of being very much positive. I can recall when I was in the legislature, there could be a real source of frustration amongst constituents who might have driven several hours to testify, and then for whatever other constraints might have only gotten a couple of minutes to make their point. In a remote environment, they might be able to make that point with significantly less sacrifice on their part to get there in person. But I don't think that means we should rely on it. I think it allows us to be selective, to supplement the in-person for people who otherwise can't get there, or to take ourselves virtually to places we might not otherwise be able to get. But we shouldn't, in my view, rely on that exclusively. I think it should be a supplementary thing to fill in gaps that we might otherwise have, to allow people to participate who might otherwise struggle to do so. But there's a certain irony to the fact that we're having this conversation virtually now about how important it is to be in person. But I think all of us can feel that too. Zoom and your other favorite platforms are adequate for some things, but I've observed, and I'm sure all of you have too, a real thirst, a real hunger for the human connection that's starting to be possible again.
Did you want me to?
Yeah, if you have any opinion.
Yeah, and I think that the treasurer is making, an excellent point. I think for a number of my clients that I work with are in more remote and rural parts of the state. And so it is very frustrating when you spend hours, 3.5, 4 hours in a car, and then the committee runs over and then you don't get your time. At the same time, so I think that making sure that we can use technology to expand access in culturally sensitive ways is really, really important. But it's also made it much more challenging because you can't hand a piece of paper to someone, and the personal connection sometimes is lost, and it becomes overwhelming, the amount of email traffic that comes in. And then it's much easier to kind of not intentionally delete it or ignore it, but it becomes somewhat self-selecting what information and who's getting paid attention to. So.
And I can't imagine, Anna, how frustrating it must be, how inefficient it must feel when you have a 6-second question to ask someone that requires scheduling something rather than just walking next to them in the hall for a handful of seconds. It's got to be really inefficient and frustrating.
It is, yeah. And I would say, and this is kind of a secondary, but I also think it's exposing how much of an industry, so to speak, lobbying has become. And I think that if you can pay to play to some degree, that is, that's where you can put somebody in the building all the time. So I think that like this is an opportunity for the state to look at all of that and what access to democracy means post-COVID.
Good point.
And we've had a question come in I just want to pose really quickly. What is the proper way to address an elected official? If they're a senator, that seems obvious, but is there a specific way, for example, a county commissioner, or how do you always, just from an intro kind of 101, is it always Commissioner Johnson, or is it always elected official Johnson? What would you recommend in terms of the address?
And you want to go first? Mine is probably a lot more anecdotal than based on etiquette.
Well, let's just say I guess I'm kind of old school on this. I mean, I still call Governor Kolongoski governor. I never call him Ted. I'm like, who's Ted? So, but that's how I operate. I think but it's also, I mean, know the title, like in city council in Portland, they're called commissioners. So it can be confusing, but I always say commissioner or treasurer. Read just out of respect for the office, and then but I think it's proper to do it that way, and then if they say to call them something else, then
I agree with that. I think it is, you will never be no one will ever be offended, particularly if you're meeting them for the first time, if you call them by their title. You can do that with a name, Commissioner Morrissey, Mayor Richter Taylor. You could also do it if it's someone you're not sure the pronunciation of their last name or something. You would say Madam Commissioner or Mr. Mayor or something like that. Those are possible as well. And after that point, if they correct you into something else, I mean, I've had governors say that to me, and I say, "Oh, call me first name," and I say, "Thank you, Governor." And I don't I don't do it. I think I'm trying to think of some way to use a title with you again, Anna, but I think you're right. It's a respect for the office as much as it is a respect for the person who occupies it. I will say I am bothered when elected officials announce themselves by saying, "My name is Senator so-and-so." No, that's the title you have, and that's fine. But the title and the person are separate, and it's important to keep those in mind as well. It's a very practical question. I'm glad we got it.
Well, Treasurer Reed, as I called you Tobias when we first.
You can, please, you can.
So we've gotten another question, and I want to read it to get a response from you both. What are 1 or 2 key books or toolkits or training courses for a local community tourism champion, destination management specialist, or state employee to learn more about this topic and practice it? And might further resources for this topic be found under the umbrella of strategic communications? What would you recommend for someone who's interested in developing these skills more?
That is not one I was prepared for. There's not a lot of books that are specifically about how to lobby, but I mean, Anna, you can definitely clean this up or correct this. I don't think there's anything that is especially magic about this challenge that is separate from the same kind of dynamics in other settings. So I think that when you can put yourself in the position of the other person and understand their interests, their vulnerabilities, all those sorts of things, you'll be more effective. And there's any number of things that could do that and be useful. A pretty old but probably underappreciated book from Dale Carnegie about how to win friends and influence people is fairly timeless.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, if there's a lot of academic books on strategic and interpersonal communications, But I think it's just the same premise that we talked about before. Like, when you're meeting with elected officials, it's the same, they're human beings too. And they communicate and receive information the same way we all do, with respect and interest, presumably. And so I think it's just effective communications in general, and then knowing your audience and the means by which they receive information. But we can also, there have been a few, like the Harvard School of Government, there's different organizations that have interesting articles, and you can stay, like there's also PRSA, there's different organizations that I'm happy to pull a list together and can send to Sarah to share in follow up. But it really is about just knowing your audience, knowing what you're trying to accomplish, and making sure you understand how they receive information, and then putting it in a format that is relatable and attainable and user friendly.
Before I was late, did you already talk about the importance of being polite to staff, particularly in the legislature? That really matters. So you're nodding, so you covered that. Good.
Yeah.
But you can emphasize that, because I mean, what I had said is that staff is the gatekeeper, and often as elected officials, you're looking to staff for the background and information before taking a meeting or when deliberating an issue or a position. So if you want to elaborate on that, that would be great, probably.
You're right. I think I would just reinforce it. They are certainly gatekeepers, and they're also, especially in the case of legislators, often the biggest influencer as to an outcome, as to a vote that a legislator might cast. I think a lot of legislators engage in what I've called sort of intellectual triage. There's so much coming at any point that it's, am I going to need to make a decision on this in the next 24 hours or 12 hours? If not, then I'm going to think about that later. And then whatever it is can sneak up quickly, and a legislator might be saying to their staff, now what's your recommendation? What's the background, and so on. And you can tell a whole lot about a person by how they treat someone they don't necessarily think is important or influential. I know I certainly would pay attention to that and ask my team how they were treated by people. So I think it's really, really important, just as a human too.
And I would just add on the last question that was posed, I think because it does seem really intimidating, and there's so many levels of elected official, whether it's federal, state, county, or city, or special district, I would start with an approach. So for your fiscal year, just make your own small plan of outreach and make it attainable. So you just want to meet with 5 different elected officials in the year, just to introduce yourself, just to start forming that relationship. And I think it's also important to share the good things that are happening in your community that they can then share with their constituents. So for example, when Travel Oregon has allocated grants and we've provided those awards, I make sure to do outreach both to the governor's office and then also to elected officials, and kind of sorting the grants by their districts at the state level, so they're aware of the resource that's going out to their community, and that they can then share that, because everyone wants positive news to share, and they want to make sure that they're aware of what's happening locally. And like Treasurer Reed said, all the information that's coming in, there's a lot of overwhelming information, and especially in the last year that we've had, I think we could all use some positive stories and just understanding how the economy is starting to open in Oregon. So I'd also suggest reaching out, even just to share, what your DMO is working on. If you have a strategic plan, we always share ours with the governor's office and specific elected. So making sure that they're just aware of all of the great work that you're doing in your local community, I think is really important. And then biting off like a small plan that you can really do, because capacity is so tight right now. So
you make a really good point, making the investment in those relationships, so that when you do need help with something, or you do want to make a point about a particular decision that might be in front of someone, it's not the first time you've talked with that person. Having that relationship and that credibility amassed can make you tons more effective. So I really support what you said.
And to follow up on that too, I think talking about low-hanging fruit, you can go on the Oregon legislative website if your target is to build relationships with state legislators, and put in your zip code and pull up who your legislator is and sign up for the newsletter. And then they do town halls, and after session they'll do constituency coffees and things like that. There's no pressure, you just go. And they're doing some virtually, but I think they're going to start doing them more in person. And you can go and just observe, introduce yourself, listen, and see, make your own observations about the other people that they're talking to, the topics that they're talking about and are interested in. And then you can decide whether or not you're comfortable to actually go up and say anything more, but it gives you that face time so that when you do want to set up a meeting later, there's at least that connection.
Legislators appreciate that too. I was always grateful for people who came and were thoughtful and were not, there in those town halls just to grind an axe on one particular issue, who had a more comprehensive set of concerns, or listen to other people as well. So another good benefit of being a regular presence.
So while I have you both, I also wanted to ask, in terms of communication tools, two things that always come up. One are form letters. So how effective do you find them as a legislator or someone who's working in the governor's office? And then the second are leave behinds. What are those helpful to provide information to the elected official or staff, or is it just another piece of paper that just gets cluttered on their desk?
I think the answer here, as is so often the case, is it depends. With respect to leave behinds, the quality of what's there, it really matters. If it's something that can reduces, not in a negative sense, but or clarifies maybe a complicated issue into something that is readily accessible, that's really useful, particularly if it's something that, it took me an investment of some time and effort. The lights keep turning off. Sorry about that. People are moving around. And I need something to jog my memory later on to say, oh yeah, this is that thing. And it can do that effectively. That's great. If it's a long text heavy sort of thing, not as helpful. I mean, I guess one way to think about it is we've all been on plenty of these Zoom meetings over the last year and a half, watching people present slides. What were the slide presentations that you found compelling and useful? And think about that as a way of measuring leave behinds. As to form letters, a form letter counts more than not hearing anything, but it counts less than a personalized letter. And there is sort of the in between, right? Like if there's the form letter that maybe prompted someone to start and they added their own paragraph, their own introduction or something like that, that's kind of an in between. Always the personal, individualized, crafted communication is more effective and more meaningful.
Yeah, I mean, I think that form letters are helpful, as the treasurer said, like in terms of supporting someone to be able to put their own story in. I think that I think it's kind of to be seen how effective they are. You can tell when something's generated by just clicking a button, but at the same time, if it's something controversial and it's and there's a lot of volume showing that the outcome is just we don't want this or we do want this, and it's just tallying the numbers, it can be very effective. But if it's a small amount and they're just copying and pasting, that doesn't have as much impact, if that makes sense. So it's kind of situational. And then what was your other question? Form letters and leave behind. I mean, again, it depends on, it's kind of a sequence. That leave behind is important. The quality and content is important. It has to actually add value to someone and to the elected official who's making the decision. And to also be able to, I always, and maybe the treasurer can chime in if this is helpful, but or not, but I always try to use anything that I put on paper to leave behind now that I'm a consultant, so that it also can provide clarification of a position and rationale for that. So if the elected official is going to be explaining an issue on behalf of my client or my position, that they have the background they need to be able to explain to a constituent why they're taking a position that they are, or that they disagree with it. It's not talking points as much as it just allows them to have something tangible to say, this is what I'm hearing and this is why I'm voting this way.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. Well said.
And also, I'm always a fan of everything's public record, right? So getting it on the record helps you in legislative history and making sure that people see the history of it if it's something that comes up time and time again. And so I do think that there's an important paper trail aspect to it.
And I'd add too that it doesn't have to be a glossy, fully done up document. It can be really, I think the content is really what's most critical. So as Anna was speaking to the rationale, the position, the facts, the bullets, I think, and again, with so much information coming in, the easier to digest the information, the better.
Yeah, it might be the thing that the legislator looks at with 30 seconds left before they have to cast a vote or something. So how can you create something that is immediately accessible and understandable?
Treasurer Reed, I wanted to ask, I'm not just going to call you Treasurer Reed the whole time.
Call me whatever you like.
So can you think of a time or an example when advocacy was not effective? When did it not work and it actually worked against the constituent, and why did that happen?
There are probably people who are calmer and more zen, undoubtedly calmer and more zen than me. But without calling out specific people, I'd never react well when someone is hostile to me, or accusing me of taking some position for some reason they don't like. It's perfectly reasonable that people will come to different conclusions and for reasons you don't like. But there's a rule in the floor of the House, I assume the Senate, I never served in the Senate, about not questioning another member's motives. You can say, well, you think it's wrong, but you can't say you're doing this because you think blah, 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 any of that. So I think that those rules are there for the same reaction that provokes in me when someone does that to me. So I think it is hard, but it is really important to only let these issues get personal to the extent that you are explaining why it matters to you, not why you think that other person who disagrees with you is a bad person. Focus on what you think is the flaw in their argument, and don't be confrontational in that way, if that makes sense.
Thank you. That does make sense. Anna, did you want to add anything?
No, I just completely agree. I don't think that you've ever seen anybody change a position because they were personally attacked and their character was assaulted. I mean, like there's ways to do it effectively and respectfully. And I think asking questions is better than going on the offensive. I mean, so.
And Anna, I was going to ask, not that you're on the consultant side, what do you see changing in how information is delivered or received?
Well, I need to be careful because I know that this is being recorded. I mean, I think that the role of the media is really important, and in a lot of ways, I'm sad in how much of a decline there is in the role of the media in influencing policy. But I would say that local papers are still very influential, and so I think getting media stories are important for positive stories too. I mean, I think we've all gone through such a hard year or so that some of the best stories are the ones where everyone's coming together and not tearing each other apart. So I think the media is still important. Social media is important. That's more in a paid role, I think, anymore, though it can be a good organizing tool and a good way to share information. And elected officials rather, do have a social media presence. It's essential now. So I think that's one way, but I still think it's evolving rapidly. And I think that we're going to see it evolve more, and I don't know how. Email can be helpful, but again, people get so many emails. So it's the media, it's the in-person. I think I almost feel like we are going back to the way it probably was 30 years ago, when there's too much technology and too much information overload, that the most effective means is going to be establishing relationships, being there in person, and making that connection, that then when you do need to pick up the phone and call them, you can have that conversation and they know who you are, they know your story, and you've got that ready ear on the other side.
I agree with all that. I think, to amplify one point in what you said, Anna, the role of social media and email can be a double-edged sword. It's an oft repeated observation about how quickly misinformation can spread. So as much as that small d democratization of that is a good thing. It also puts a bigger onus on people to be appropriately skeptical and to seek confirmation or separate source for things. We can all probably think of rumors that spread quickly but turned out not to be true, and that's also a danger.
Yes, and it also it's a lot easier to be critical on
Anonymously.
Anonymously or on an email and then to someone's face. And so I think just back to basics.
I've done that a few times when I got an email and called a constituent and said, so I got your email that, might have been especially rude or profane or anything else. And sometimes that's all I need to say. And they're shocked that someone read it or called them back or any of that. And I think that's valuable too.
So we've had another question come in that I think we hear a lot in the tourism sector. What are your thoughts on human metrics versus hard abstract numbers? And we've heard this from our partners at the regional level, that sometimes the numbers around whether it be the return on investment for advertising dollars. So we say, based on this Travel Oregon ad, the ROI generated $8 in state and local taxes. And then we'll sometimes speak to these very large numbers with Dean Runyon of the industry representing $12.8 billion of visitor spending, which can sometimes get really taken apart. And so we'd really like to just get your insight on those human metrics and kind of those qualitative stories versus quantitative kind of hard facts and figures.
And I feel like I've been answering first too often.
Okay, yeah, sure. I think that it's always great to have the data, but then you need the story to support it and validate it. So the rate of return on investment, if you're saying it's for every dollar invested, it's $8 in return, then connect the dots so that it shows a certain industry or subsection of the tourism industry has grown X amount, especially in a local community. And then connect the dot even further to that coffee shop who employs 5 people or the outfit or whatever it is. But I think using it at the umbrella level, but then quickly bridging to the connection at the local level and making it tangible for that audience is important.
100% agree. The only thing I'd add is that the reason I think that is important is that people have more of an ability to retain that story than they do the statistic. The statistic is more likely to stick if it's connected to a story that they can remember.
That's great, thank you. And we only have about 4 minutes left because the next session will start right at 1:15. So I'd like to ask for just closing thoughts on really building that bridge with elected officials. What would you recommend for people who are just starting down this process? What should they try to do in this next fiscal year? What would be your top tips and recommendations?
I think you already both said it. It is being proactive. It is looking for an opportunity to build a relationship with the people who make decisions that you care about. And it should be separate from any specific thing, though those will undoubtedly come up. And doing that in the district, not in the capital, in a space where everyone is relaxed and there's more capacity for thoughtful conversation. In the building, everything is compressed, even when there's not a pandemic on. It's much more effective and relaxed if you can do it at the coffee shop, or invite someone to your business or someplace where you can not only tell them what you're concerned about, but show them. That's even one step maybe beyond the story we were just talking about. If they can have an experience themselves, that'd be even more effective, I think. So I'd summarize, I guess, by be proactive, build relationships.
Yeah, I don't think I can say it much better than that. I think first identify who's the elected official or the that has the most impact or influence on your business or your concerns, and then identify how to best interact with them in a more casual setting so that it becomes personal and you're building the relationships. to build on what the treasurer said, so that when you do potentially need them, or they may need you, they may want to bring you to a table and get your input on something. So I think having that relationship foundation is critical. So identifying who that should be and then start doing that outreach.
And think creatively, it's not just legislators. It may well
Right.
be a local person. And I like what you said, Anna, too. It's totally true as a legislator, knowing who the expert is on a particular issue is a huge value to the elected. So don't feel like you are burning them. You might be offering them a great resource because of your expertise, and introducing yourself could be a great value to them too.
Well, and I know that I'm not supposed to ask questions, but can I ask the treasurer a question that I think would be helpful? I do think would you speak at all to how much as the state treasurer or as a legislator, you also look to other local elected officials and to their—
Of course.
Okay.
Of course. I mean, there I am in the Capitol, whether as a legislator or treasurer, I'm not interacting on the ground in the way that a mayor is, or a sheriff or a commissioner or something like that. I might have my opinion about something, but having the ability to call and say, now, here's what I think. Is that actually true? Or I'm not sure what to think about this. How do you see it playing out? Of course, that's helpful. And it's true of other elected, it's true of other, it's just expertise to be able to draw on, particularly in the case of legislators, where typically there's a legislator and the legislators maybe one staff, and often feeling kind of under-equipped to take everything in. So any place you can grab some other resources in terms of expertise is a wonderful thing.
Great, thank you. Well, so yeah, and I guess that was the reason I asked that question, is just as we started, that making that local connection first, because they can also be an advocate in Salem for
Multiplier, for sure.
Yeah, and I just say, just start small and just, again, like build a really small plan for yourself based on whatever capacity you have, with all the time. A lot of it, building relationships take time. And if you try to bite off more than you can chew and it just seems overwhelming, then it'll just be very stressful. And I think just starting small with some really key relationships, like Anna said, tying back to the issues that you do want to raise or build those relationships around is really the best way to start. All right, so I want to thank you both so much for joining us, and I really enjoyed our conversation and look forward to just hearing more about public affairs in the space that the tourism industry can play moving forward. So with that, everyone who's on this call, I just want to say thank you for your time, and we will be closing the session. The next session starts immediately at 1:15. So you'll have to log out and then go to your new Zoom link to go back to the closing session in the general conference. So thank you all.
Thanks, everyone. Keep in touch, please.
Thanks.